Greetings. My name is Kellam Throgmorton. I work for Woods Canyon Archaeological Consultants, which is in Cortez, Colorado. And starting about 2 weeks from now, I'm going to be a graduate student at SUNY Binghamton University in New York. I'm going to be speaking about some recently completed survey that Woods Canyon has done. We've surveyed several thousand acres of both land on Canyons of the Ancients National Monument in southwest Colorado, as well as adjacent private land. Most of this has been undertaken in areas that have seen some sort of previous survey, but some of the private land hasn't been looked at. And it's all related to ongoing CO2 development by Kinder Morgan. And Jerry Fetterman is going to describe more of the general gist of what we've been up to tomorrow. I'm going to talk about the Basketmaker 3 and early Pueblo 1 data set that's coming out of this survey. The survey suggests that the settlement history is really tightly linked from about 600 or 650, as Shauna was saying at the early end, up until about 800 on the McElmo Dome. And in a nutshell, there's just a lot more Basketmaker 3 settlement out there than we would have initially thought. And there are several unrecognized early Pueblo 1 villages as well on the McElmo Dome. The study area basically extends from Lowry Ruins in the north down to McElmo Creek, and from a little bit west of Highway 491 over to about Cross Canyon and Mockingbird Mesa. And I think it's good to point out that this is occurring on previously inventoried lands in a lot of cases. Some of these places form the core of several major study areas like the VEP, the Village Ecodynamics Project. I'll start with the Basketmaker 3. As many of you are probably aware, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that southwest Colorado has. There's more Basketmaker 3 habitations out there than have been previously noted. Well, we can put some numbers on that. First off, I'll say there is limited evidence of early Basketmaker 3. We're not seeing a lot of sites with polished gray wares, gray-brown wares, brown wares, stuff to suggest a lot of occupation in the 400s and 500s. That's consistent with other findings in the region. So when I say Basketmaker 3, I'm meaning about 600, 650 and onward. Our results suggest that there are about 3 times as many Basketmaker 3 sites in the region than have been previously noted on survey, and almost all of these are habitations. For example, our Yellow Jacket survey block, which basically was a 1.5 mile radius around Albert Porter Pueblo, there were 10 previously identified Basketmaker 3 components. We added 29 new ones in addition to that. And in the Cow Canyon survey block, which is close to Lowry, there were 14 previous Basketmaker 3 habitations. We've added 25 new ones in addition to that. So that gives you an idea of the kind of increase we're seeing when, as we're going back and intensively inventorying these areas. These sites are recognized by clusters of rock, basically. Small clusters of rock, 2 to 3 meters in diameter, maybe 40 or to 150 stones. But when you map them out, they tend to form arcs, suggesting this is the surface architecture. There's structures that go unrecognized. There's not really depressions out there. And they're associated with often very low density sherd scatters, although some sites do have formalized middens as well. The sherds are primarily plain gray with chapin gray and small amounts of chapin black on white presence. And just to note, we've had a couple of pit houses appear on monitoring projects when there were only 2 sherds visible on the surface. So that's why a lot of this stuff has been going, kind of slipping under the radar screen. I think it's important also to point out that we have not encountered any large public architecture like the Dillard site. And that's not necessarily to say it's not there. A lot of these areas have been intensively chained. They're mesa top locales, and they're also being farmed currently, so there's a lot of plowing up there. We've excavated a few sites recently, and this gives us a general look at what kind of time period these surface scatters might date to. Most of our dates are coming back somewhere in the 680 to 730-ish range, so actually a little bit later than the Dillard site, which reinforces some of what Shauna was saying about it. So for the early Pueblo 1, by the numbers, it doesn't look as dramatic as Basketmaker 3. I mean, we've got survey blocks that had 1 previously recorded early Pueblo 1 site, now there might be 3. So proportionally it's similar, but there's way fewer sites. But this is actually really deceptive. We've got 7 substantial early Pueblo 1 settlements, and most of them have been previously documented in one fashion or another, but I don't think any of them were actually documented in full. These sites are much, much bigger than have been previously recognized. We've got a couple of sites that are sherd scatters that extend for over 500 meters. they're quite sizable, and it's a lot like what Winston was saying earlier today, where it's hard to pick out that you can't see the forest for the trees because you're in the midst of just an endless sea of sherds, and you're going, well, what are these concentrations, separate sites, or are we talking about different room blocks within one large site? When it's possible to estimate the number of households in these new, larger settlements that we're seeing in early Pueblo 1, they tend to be on the order of the number of Basketmaker 3 settlements that are in the immediate area. So we actually see some good continuity, I think, in terms of the number of people who are out on the landscape. Just to give you an idea about the size of these settlements, we had 2 on Mockingbird Mesa, one of which the total length of the measurable room blocks was about 300 meters, and there's a possible Great Kiva that was indicated by some LiDAR data. Another one has over 230 meters of estimated room block length, and one that's on kind of the north end of Goodman Point has maybe 150 to 200 meters of total room block length. And depending on whether you like to estimate household population by pit houses or by surface rooms, this could be anywhere from 20 to 40 households per settlement. So these are villages, really, they're villages. The sites are recognized by very sparse rock scatters. Oftentimes just single cobble foundations, sparse scatters of burnt adobe, and occasional upright slabs, which suggests that it's probably adobe architecture and almost entirely adobe in many cases, although there are certain portions of room blocks that are more substantially constructed. And there's at least 2 forms of architecture that are apparent in these early villages. Some of them tend to have single long room blocks that are about 100 meters long. Others are sort of dispersed but still aggregated communities of smaller single or double household settlements that are maybe 20 meters long. And then there's other sites that are a combination of the 2, where there's one large room block and maybe 10 or 12 additional households surrounding it, which is kind of remarkably similar to some patterns we see later in Pueblo 2 with Chacoan sites. So that's kind of an interesting thing popping up. The sites are ceramically, we're looking at a lot of plain grayware, Chapin grayware, polished whitewares, Chapin and Piedra black on white, but also a Baja red on orange and Bluff black on red are really what sets a lot of these scatters apart from the Basketmaker 3 sites. And importantly, there are no neck banded sherds on these. So we think that there's actually a pretty tight ceramic dating between about 750 and 800 at the late end on this. So, kind of, what's this all boil down to? But I think with the larger number of Basketmaker 3 habitations that we're identifying on the McElmo Dome, we do have to be thinking about population movement into the region earlier than has been suggested in some cases. There's been a lot of emphasis on this early Pueblo 1, mid-Pueblo 1 population growth after 800 or between 750 and 800. I think just like Shauna was pointing out with the Dillard site, it really is looking like the influx might be happening at 600, 650 in big numbers. And excavation and the surface data suggest that there's great homogeneity in the architectural signature of these sites, which to me suggests that there's a lot of prior experience with some sort of social unity or forms of community before some of these people are possibly moving into the McElmo Dome region. As for the large early Pueblo 1 settlements, I think we need to explore the relationship between these large 100-meter long room blocks that are basically multi-family residences and the single household settlement that tend to surround them. What kind of social relations obtain between the people in these rather different looking kinds of settlements? And it goes to point out that it's not just the late Pueblo 1 period that begins to see these big arcs of rooms that we tend to associate with some sort of corporate group. And I think that this highlights that there is greater and lesser social solidarity between groups that are simultaneously occupying single villages in the McElmo Dome region. It makes me think our social patterns that were already happening in Basketmaker 3 just being formalized in architecture by the early Pueblo 1 period. And it's important to point out the architectural technology is remarkably similar, but the deployment of the architecture is really different. People are reinterpreting how they're using the same technology. And the continuity on the McElmo Dome from 650 to 800, to me, suggests we ought to revise how we break up our important cultural temporal boundaries, because basically where we've been pushing the edge of Pueblo 1 and Basketmaker 3 right around 750, we're missing this period of intense cultural change. And it makes sense to me that maybe we should think on the McElmo Dome more in terms of 600 to 800. So we capture this period of important cultural change as opposed to saying, well, let's look at the period before it and then the period after it, and it really obscures the transition in the middle. So, I mean, it's kind of anathema at Pecos conference to talk about, well, I don't know, what do we think about Pecos designations, but saying for the McElmo Dome, maybe it makes a lot more sense to be going 600 to 800 instead of, 550 to 750, 750 to 900. So, anyway, feel free to catch me afterwards if you have any questions. I'd love to chat with you. So, thanks a lot.